So just a little vlog talk that we're going to be doing some more of these, but kind of cross between a vlog and an interview. I wanted to talk a little bit about what makes the Muay Thai library special. It's growing at a pretty fast rate. Right now we have over 50 hours of archived video, of commentary and documentation of Thai techniques. So in your view, what makes this project, this documentary project, special from what's come before it, and what's the wide view value of this?
I don't know that anything even really like it has come before it to compare it, but it's unique for many reasons, one of which is that the technology and social media of the time makes it possible. This wasn't possible 10 years ago. Just in terms of being able to shoot and upload as we go, and, you know, have an online archive like this. Another thing that really stands out to me about what makes it a different approach entirely is that I think that before, especially in the West, the idea was to come to Thailand and like collect techniques and learn secrets that you then kind of keep and hoard and can bestow upon your students as this kind of like, we have a secret key, which is not how Muay Thai works at all. Muay Thai is very communal. Muay Thai is very like infused into the entire lifestyle, and people borrow from each other and steal from each other and all these things. That I like that it changes that. I like that the library flies in the face of that. That's like, these are not secrets, but rather these are systems. What I like about the long form is that you can actually see how each technique fits into a system of these trainers. So I get the question a lot, like all the time, don't you find it confusing, or isn't it hard for you to learn two conflicting technique styles? So an example is Karahat telling me to lean back on the knee and Yodkunpan telling me don't lean back on the knee. Those are different. But if you just take them as they are, like just pieces, they do conflict, and it doesn't. It's like, do you do it or do you not do it?
Do this or don't, right?
Right. It's like, is it a stone or is it a rock?
Yeah.
And you're like, they mean the same thing, but you kind of use them in different.
That's kind of a weird analogy.
Context. But when you watch their entire system, it totally makes sense. Yodkunpan wants to throw 10 knees, so you don't lean back on them. Karahat wants to spear in and cover this distance and do something else. So it makes sense within the context of what their entire style and system is, which you can see when you see the longer form.
I want to go back to this. I'm always interested in the pedagogy of an art, whether it be a martial art or something else. That the previous transmission of Thai technique was what you said, like brave people would come to Thailand when nobody was coming to Thailand and learn from Thai camps and basically learn real Thai technique, and it would kind of like filter down into the West as they came back and opened schools. And then that gym, like you say, that gym would have like a kind of like their house private stash of techniques that you didn't show anybody.
Right.
Like I remember there was some Western gym before we came to Thailand, was like, this is our gym clinch move, don't show anybody. Remember that?
No.
But it makes sense that it's kind of like, that was kind of like the old like martial art kung fu idea, where schools kept their techniques to themselves. And then out of that ethic, that tradition or habit of passing techniques, when DVDs came out and everything else, that's where you got the like demo, where the techniques were no longer secret, but they were chunked in like demonstrations. And there weren't a lot of those.
It's like having a vocabulary list. Like,
yeah, right.
Cool words or whatever.
And now with the Muay Thai library, you are, because they're teaching you in a live full hour, you get to see the man himself communicating his whole style, choosing which techniques to like convey to you at any particular time. Mm-hmm. And you could go back to him next week and it would be a completely different lesson. Mm-hmm. So there's something about this archive that's like creating a very different record of what Muay Thai is, right? Mm-hmm. Previous to this, you could only watch these men in YouTube fights to see their style.
Yeah, and even then, not many, right?
Right. Some of them, very few are recorded, like Duuglas-Ittu or something like that. Can you tell me a little bit about what it means to you to be like not only capturing the techniques in their context, but also the men who are teaching them? Like how the man, the fighter, and the technique are not entirely separable.
I don't think they're separable at all. Part of what is so exciting to me about Muay Thai is that it is expressing the man who's doing it. So,
and we say man here in Thailand because just to be gendered about it, right?
It's men that I'm watching.
It's men that are doing it, and in Thailand, it's a code of masculinity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that female Muay Thai women are expressing themselves as well, but I don't think that they have the freedom to express as much of themselves as easily. So it's not as... It's restricted, so it's not as like, holy shit kind of thing. So I'm taken by being a fan of a fighter who I've seen on YouTube, or I've watched these fights, and then you go and you meet them in person, and you see snippets of this expression in their masculinity just in the way that they walk around. But you also see that it highlights aspects of themselves that is not prevalent in the way that they walk around. It's like you get to be this other thing when you step into the ring, that I think is really incredible. And the way that these men teach, or what they teach, or how they use methods to pass on those techniques, so much of it comes from how they learned, which is cool. So you get to like feel this call back to the way that they were raised. But then part of it is like making amendments to the way that they were taught, that they've thought about, and that they kind of like twist a little bit.
Well, let me slow down for a second. Talk a little bit about specific examples where you see like you cannot separate the technique from the man. Like when you're around Duuglas-Ittu, the viciousness of his knees complements the technique that he's teaching. And that if you taught that technique outside of the man and the energy, it would be a different thing.
Well, that's the amazing thing
about around the ring, right?
That's the amazing thing about Duuglas-Ittu as a perfect example of this, is when we did the seminar, he's teaching a technique, right? And so everyone is doing the technique that he's talking about. They're like, put your heel up by your hip, you know, so that you can get the drive and all of this stuff, and you're technically doing all of it, right? You're pronouncing the word correctly. And he just would not, because nobody had the energy. Nobody was like trying to hurt someone with the technique, which is part of the technique. Like the energy is part of the technique, and if you don't do that, you're not doing Duuglas-Ittu.
Right.
And so he keeps pushing for it, and that's the way in which his Muay Thai is inseparable from his
And that's what
energy.
I think is very interesting about the library project, is like you're not only watching it to learn specific techniques, but you're watching the man who kind of invented the technique and made it his own, and the expression of it. Like Jen Hong Tong Noi, that Jen, help me.
Hong Tong Lek.
Hong Tong Lek, who Thimar fighter. The way he's talking about Muay Thai as he's showing you how to off tempo somebody, you feel his Muay. Like, and then if you're watching this, you're not just learning little techniques, but if you have affinity for the man and the way that he is, like the joy he has, like all of these men are expressing the joy of their art, which allows you to understand the technique, like, and maybe adopt the things that you have affinity for. You're like, God, I love that style, that thing. And then those are techniques that you might want to include in your own Muay or practice. Because Jen and Joe both were like, we watched people on TV fight and then we'd imitate them. Like, who speaks to you? That's an interesting thing about this
They're
this
imitating
library.
energies, and they're imitating style.